Professor Fran Grace in the Department of Religious Studies. I'm delighted that you're all here. If you can't find a seat, maybe there's the floor that's comfortable. I would like to thank our co-sponsors for this special event, the Meditation Room Program, Campus Diversity and Inclusion, the Johnston Center, the Departments of Religious Studies, Psychology, Women and Gender Studies. Thanks also to the Pride Alliance and to Professor Amy Moff, who decks classes, and other student groups who contributed to the inspiration and direction of this event. H. Adam Ackley, PhD, has a unique story to share. His story is saving lives. Adam is transgender and a Christian. He's a lifelong practitioner of yoga. This special evening will begin with a personal sharing by Adam about his journey, followed by a dialogue between Adam and myself based on 25 questions that were submitted by University of Redlands students. And then we'll have audience Q&A. H. Adam Ackley is a writer, speaker, consultant, and educator who received his PhD in philosophy from Claremont Graduate University in 1997. He has spent almost 2 decades teaching philosophy, history, and spirituality as a full-time college professor. He's the author of a book entitled Women, Music, and Faith in Central Appalachia, and he's also the author now of a very popular Huffington Post blog. That's great. He is a practitioner of Hatha Yoga and meditation for 40 years. He's also being certified as a yoga instructor, and he serves as an ordained minister in the Church of the Brethren. You may know that this is one of the few denominations within Christianity that is distinguished by its strong commitment to peace and nonviolence. I met Adam 15 years ago. We were colleagues in a year-long fellowship program for professors in theology and religious studies around teaching. At the time, Adam impressed me with his very sharp intellect and his heartfelt giftedness for teaching. Those things still impress me about him. Those things have not changed. But alas, many other things about Adam's life have changed since that time. I had no knowledge of the inner journey that Adam was on until I saw him a few months ago. Hearing his story touched me deeply. I'm grateful that he's here tonight to share his journey of healing with us. There's a mysterious yet discernible awakening that happens when someone has the courage to speak the truth of their own experience. I think this is because we're all connected at the level of the heart. We may not be able to fully understand the exact nature of what another person has gone through, but we are lifted nonetheless by the grace of their courage. Because we are all part of the whole, when someone heals something in themselves, it's as if they are healing also for the whole world. Much like the rising of the sea lifts all ships, so the radiance of courage in a single human life can lift all of life. Thank you for being here, Adam. I look forward to everything.
Well, no pressure to follow that introduction. Okay, so hi, I'm Adam. The H, I'm just going to mention this because it sounded a little funny to be introduced with an initial in my name. I was Heather. That was my birth name. And out of respect for the continuity of my life and for my family that named me Heather, I've kept Heath as my first name. But I don't answer to that name, I answer to Adam. So, and also, I picked Adam so I could keep I was Heather Ann. So I wanted to keep consistency with my initials. And I wanted an A name, and I chose Adam because in Hebrew, Ha-Adam, hence also another reason the H remains important to me. Ha-Adam is the first human being who isn't divided into 2 genders until chapter 2, verse 22 of the first book of the Bible. So I look at Ha-Adam, which literally in Hebrew, we translate it sometimes in English as Adam, as a proper name, but in the Hebrew, it's a noun that just means the human being that's made of earth. And I love that name as my name because I feel like instead of making me unusual or unique or different in some way, it affirms my connectedness, like Fran was saying, with all of humanity. I feel first and foremost that I'm just a human being. I know my gender is a little different. It's in the 1% category. 99% of people don't identify as trans, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that we're all human together. So anyway, that's a boring little footnote about age. So if I go that far with just one initial, you can imagine how long this lecture will be. I'm kidding. Well, don't worry. Okay, so this picture, I'm just going to say a word about this picture because one of my former students, actually I never had him in a class, but one of the things I was doing at my last university is mentoring LGBTQ students. And we were at a Christian university together, that most of them are still there. And it wasn't a safe place, like I understand University of Redlands is, for the most part. Some of you individually may, for whatever reason, not feel totally safe or might be questioning. But in general, it sounds like you have a very affirming environment here. Many people at religious institutions, particularly Christian institutions, don't feel safe as undergrads coming out with their true gender and sex identity. So I mentored students, some of whom are in kind of an underground, not literally underground, but a discreet, secret society. They have a safe house off campus, and they're just amazing activists. They're just I love them to death. I call them my kids. They call themselves my baby. They call them my babies. Oh, that doesn't sound right. But anyway, we love each other. Anyway, we've adopted each other as family. A lot of them have been disowned by Christian families who don't affirm who they are. And so we are each other's family. And so this is one of my, as I think, one of my kids. And I don't mean that in a youthful way, like a derogatory or childlike way, but as like I have adult children as well, college age and teenagers. So I feel like part of my family there, Robert Hernandez, made a picture of me with the trans pride flag over me before I started transitioning, but they knew what was coming. And we did they organized this. I was so proud of them, but they organized a sort of a nonviolent direct action on campus where they posted pictures of themselves and any allies. Unfortunately, there were only 2 professors, and I was one of them who stood with them on this, but they posted pictures of themselves and their stories as to why they didn't feel safe on that campus. And they put that up on a wall and before the National Coming Out Day. And so this was one of the pictures they created for that event. They put trans pride flags over anybody's picture that identified as trans, and rainbow flags over anybody's picture that identified within the spectrum of LGBT otherwise. So that's a happy picture for me, that's why it's there. All right, is this gonna work? Okay, so I know you can't read that. This just kind of reminds me to give you some context. Fran has a copy of this. Fran Grace, your professor here, and one of the professors here at University of Redlands who's organized this, who's going to be dialoguing with me afterwards, who introduced me. So if you need to read more about this, you'll see it. She can share it with you. You're free to share it. Oh, also Robin Cooper. Did we announce that Robin Cooper's in the back? Okay, so Robin Cooper is right there, and she's a counselor. I'm sorry, I'm not good with the titles. Can you say?
Sure, I'm clinical psychologist at the counseling center. So
Okay.
we'll just see here, does anyone need any support around reality?
And I understand you have a gender questioning support group that meets on Thursdays here. You have an LGBT support group also that meets on Thursday evenings here. She can tell you more about that, but we wanted to make sure you have resources on campus. If this stirs up anything for you, Robin and I are going to be here staying after the dialogue so you can have people to talk to. Okay. And here's why, okay, here's why. Okay, so I have this nasty little thing I found on Facebook, and I put this on my wall for a while, because it explains kind of something that I felt after I came out from some people that pushed back, a lot of people that were religious bigots. My point of bringing this up is just to say, sometimes we get the question, you're transgender. I'm 48 now, I just had a birthday. And people say, well, why did you wait so long to tell everybody that you're transgender? So I feel like it's really important to explain why not just me, but a lot of people my age have not come out until very recently. I'm so happy, and I know I speak for transgender brothers and sisters of my age group and older who say this to me all the time. We are so happy that it's different for your generation. We are so happy that you can be yourself at a much earlier age and live in your identity as a young adult and go through your life as yourself. Even if you're questioning, but if you're able to question and feel safe questioning, yay. I mean, that's just wonderful. It really, really is. But and please don't judge those of us that weren't able to do that. I'd like to share with you why. You'll see this in my story when I go through it. I don't have a lot of text in this slideshow, but I do just to start off. So what happened last year for me, it affected me personally, but it affected thousands of transgender people. It was only last year in May that the American Psychological Association changed their diagnostic manual to recognize transgender identity not as a mental illness that had to be cured, but changed that to say sometimes some people who are transgender, that's a big change in itself, who are transgender experience something called dysphoria. And what that means is that if you are transgender, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means, but if that happens to be your gender, living in a society where that's not affirmed, where it confuses people, where it angers people, where people try to tell you not to be transgender when you really are, all those things can make you feel very depressed, very anxious. They lead to a higher rate of suicide in the transgender population. It's 3 times for transgender people what it is for any other group. The suicide attempt rate in the transgender community in this country is about 50%. It's like 47%. Some other countries it's even worse. And that's a recent statistic. That's actually from 2012. So this is a very hard culture in which to be trans. And it's just now, again, and since 2013, May 2013, that this change came about in care and diagnosis and treatment of transgender people. So what happened, and you see this in the slideshow, what happened for people like me, and I am just one example of thousands of people who experienced this. We would go for help. We would say, I'm confused about my gender. I don't feel like I'm this or that, or something's wrong and I'm not sure what it is. We'd talk about these things and we'd be told, oh, you're a mentally ill person who needs to take psychiatric medication. You're psychotic, you're demented, you're whatever. Many of us were given hormones not to help us be ourselves, but to make us to conform to the gender that we were expected to be. So like myself, at 15 years old, like many trans men, I did not have regular experience of puberty. Many trans people don't have regular puberty. It's regular for us as trans, but people who don't know us as know what trans is and don't know how to treat trans clients get confused, and they try to make us conform medically to cisgender, which just simply means not trans. Cisgender, by the way, I better answer that because I know it's coming. So cisgender is not a derogatory term. It was coined in the early 90s by a caregiving professional. I believe it was a social worker. Simply means near or alongside of is what cis means. So if you understand your gender to be near or alongside of the gender that you were given assigned at birth, that people see you as, then not derogatory at all, but it's just saying you're pretty much in congruity with the gender that you look to be and that people understand you to be. Transgender, on the other hand, for 1 to 3% of people, usually most people think it's about closer to 1%, means that for whatever variety of reasons, many of them are medical reasons, the gender with which we identify, that we feel ourselves to be, that we understand ourselves to be, doesn't match what other people have told us we are. Okay, so in any case, like many of us in the trans community, the treatment used to be to give us hormones to make us more like cisgender or gender-conforming people, and psychiatric meds. I have a lot of other things on this slide based on questions that I often get. I just want to, this is really from some workshops that I've done and others that I've taken, but just to really say that even when the trans person comes out, the fact that many people will say, I don't accept this new identity, I didn't know you in this identity, I'm still going to call you by that other name, I'm still going to use the other pronouns, that's very disorienting to people who are trans. Also, employment discrimination, that's something I very publicly experienced in my own life. The unemployment rate for transgender people who are out is 3 times that of non-transgender people. It is a reality. Now, if you're transgender and you're in this audience, I don't want you to lose hope. I mean, things are changing rapidly, and there's certainly plenty of people who are trans who are employed. Sometimes it takes us a little longer to find the right fit for us. The open-minded community who affirms us as ourselves. It's not hopeless, but it is real, and it is enough to make some people stay in the closet. The other thing I would say about this is that the ways that many transgender people would like to feel more like themselves, things like treatments with the hormones that their bodies don't naturally produce, surgery to remove parts of their bodies that those hormones put in play that they don't identify with, things like that. Those are things that often have to be paid for out of pocket, even if one has health insurance. And so not everybody can afford those expensive treatments. Some people also have allergic reactions to taking the hormones of the gender they identify with, so they can't or don't do that. And of course, we'll probably talk about this later, but some people are not trying to get any kind of treatment at all. They just simply experience themselves as not in the binary gender. They may feel androgynous or non-gendered or bigendered or gender fluid. There's a lot of different language for varying gender experiences. So, okay, that was a lot of information. This whole lecture, I promise, is not going to be dry like that. I just wanted to give you some background as to why the heck do I have the audacity to come here in front of you and tell my life story. I'm a very shy person naturally, so I don't like, and you might probably remember 15 years ago, I don't like to talk about myself. So for me to come up here and do this, I kind of feel like I have to say this is why it's important. And this little meme is one reason it's important. This is a few years old, but again, it just reminds us that for transgender people, there are some very serious issues to face whether we transition or don't transition. 57% rejected by families, kicked out of families. It's a very painful thing to do. It's hard for the families, it's hard for the people who are transgender. This is another thing, again, I'm not going to go through the whole slide, but I just want to tell you that one of the problems we have in our culture that transgender people have is something that we call transphobia. So I'm sure you all know what homophobia is. Transgender people talk about experiencing transphobia. Transphobia is that hatred or fear of transgender people or transgender identity that some of us experience. It's the very thing that leads to the fact that, for example, the murder rate of transgender people in hate crimes is still, as of 2013, higher than all other groups targeted for hate crimes put together. It's worst for transgender women of color, but transgender people are very hated by certain people. Not by, obviously not by maybe any of you, but this is a very real thing that we face. In religion, it's particularly religious community. I will say this, all the death threats I've received have come from people who are very, very religious. Religious fundamentalists, primarily Christians. There's one other group, and I'm not going to name them, but there's also one other religious group that has fundamentalism in its spectrum, from which I've also received the death threats. So religious people have a real hard time with this. If they think that their community's traditions and scriptures teach only a binary understanding of gender, then they sometimes feel that to say I'm transgender is an insult to their God, that it's a blasphemy, it's an abomination. Some people that contact me from around the country, young adults about your age, will tell me my pastor or my family told me I'm going to hell if I transition. And by transition, I don't even mean taking any medical course of action, but simply identifying openly as transgender. All right, so I've devoted my life in recent times to helping people understand that there aren't world scriptures that teach that transgender is a sin or an abomination. I know that's one interpretation out there, but I certainly devoted my life to studying Christian scriptures and Hebrew scriptures, Jewish scriptures, and there's nothing anti-trans in those scriptures. That's a kind of a cultural thing. So my slide here is really just simply to say that since I'd say the start of the 20th century, there have been studies done in Europe. I have up here named Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. They saw clients as early as the early 20th century, let's say. The early 20th century in Vienna, they were seeing clients that they saw did not identify with their birth gender. The term transgender wasn't coined until 1966. But there were records, case studies, of people not identifying with their birth gender going back since the birth of psychology in the late 19th century. And these very famous clinicians had collected this data. The point is that by 1966, when the term transsexual, which evolved into transgender, was coined by Harry Benjamin, he was able to document that in Canada, in Great Britain, in the United States, and all over Europe, people using the tools of psychology for about 100 years were not able, in even one case, to help a person who didn't identify with their birth gender be able to identify with their birth gender through psychology. That's my point. It's not a mental illness. Freud knew it wasn't a mental illness. Carl Jung knew it wasn't a mental illness. And as early as 1966, with the publication of this book for the medical community and also for lawmakers and things like that, the medical evidence of people having diverse gender markers has been out there. So I hear commonly reported in the news, even today in mainstream news, we don't know what makes a person transgender. That is patently false. We've known for decades that there are 6 or 7 different biological gender markers. One of them is on the outside of the body. You can see it when a baby's born. Even in some people, that's ambiguous. We usually call that intersex today. But even for those of us who have what appears to be clearly identifiable reproductive organs on the outside of their bodies for one particular gender, the other gender markers could be totally different. Those are neurological, the endocrine system, hormones, chromosomes, various genetic factors. But anyway, there are several other gender markers, and in many people there, I think I have on the next slide, and you will never be able to read this, but again, Fran has this. All right, so all I'm going to say here is that every person before they are born is androgynous. For about 3 days, we're bathed in hormones in utero, and 99% of people will develop a particular kind of gender. Within the binary gender system, 99% of people will go one way or the other. About 1% of us develop in a way that we're kind of both genders. Some of our gender markers will be in one gender, and some of, maybe one of them, the one that's externally identifiable, will develop a different way. So that then we go through life as I have. I'll just use myself for an example. Absolutely certain from earliest toddlerhood that, for example, that I am a boy. And I can feel that boy part because my brain is wired for it. My nerve endings in my brain are wired for it. And that's not, it sounds crazy. I always thought it was crazy because I didn't know other trans men. Now I do. That's normal for transgender people. Normal for trans men. I mean, not every trans man has that, but it's not at all uncommon. So my brain is male. It's wired for a male body. But I needed help to get there. So anyway, there are all kinds of syndromes that are identifiable with genetic testing, with brain scans and so forth, to show us that there are some people who have gender identity markers in more than one gender. And so we'll experience dysphoria. Okay, but now we get to the less point part. That was all to say, look, this isn't just about me, I swear. Okay, but now it's going to be just about me. So this is me when I was known as Heather Ann Ackley, and this is me with my grandpa. My family, when I started to come out, my dad and my grandfather went back through the family archives and picked out a bunch of photos to just, because I said, you know, I remember living like a little boy and thinking I was a little boy. And I remember when you guys, it was my grandpa and my grandma tried to potty train me, I remember having all those fights with you about how I wanted to stand up. And you told me it was too messy. And I didn't get it. And it took 2 years to potty train me. And I was like, yeah, I remember that little boy. And they were like, well, let's go see. So they pulled together some photos. I'm just giving you a teeny tiny sample of what they sent me. But this one, I just like it because this attitude has served me well recently. I was born with that attitude, I guess. But my first sentence was, I told you no. No, I told you I said no. A nice long sentence, my first sentence. So thank goodness I had that little attitude because I've needed it recently. Anyway, I thought I was going to grow up and be like my grandpa. That's why I have this picture sitting in Grandpa's lap. Because, again, when I was... Sorry to be so nitty-gritty here, but this is transgender experience. My little transgender boy brain told me I was supposed to pee like Grandpa. And I really could not understand why I didn't. So that's just a little thing. Okay, so this is me. So I'm this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, the Ernie shirt, that's me. Okay. Back. Okay. So the little one there is my sister. But the reason I'm sharing these is not because I want you to fuss over how cute I was, although that would be nice. But no, I'm just kidding. My reason is I want you to see this smiling little kid. And you can see that I was permitted to, we had a talk about hair over dinner. I was permitted to have the hair that made sense to me, and I was permitted essentially to dress and present in an androgynous way, and I was very happy. I was a happy little kid at this point. And it's important to remember this little guy because he didn't get to grow up until about 40 years later. I started kindergarten, again, I'm just showing this because, again, I was at this point allowed to present in the way that was comfortable for me. Even though I was obviously using the female name. I didn't really question it a lot. I was a little confused, but I was pretty much allowed. They had a thing then called Free to Be You and Me. Ms. Magazine, yay, you know, okay, my parents raised me that way. My mother was the local feminist, the local founder of the local chapter of the National Organization for Women. I've grown up in Cleveland, so I was very blessed to have family that wasn't imposing binary gender on me for the most part. So I didn't have a lot of struggle at this point, as you can see, but I was starting to get confused. Really, I look at starting public school as the beginning of really difficult times for me. So here, what do I want to be when I grow up? Obviously, a cowboy. Now, why isn't it under the girl section? I don't know. I had to be, okay, and here I am again. Well, now, in second grade, I want to be president. First grade, I also want to be president. I wrote it in under girls. Thank you very much. I didn't live in that world. I didn't grow up in that world. But anyway, it was a little confusing, and people would say to me when I was that little guy, but you want to be a cowgirl. And I said, no, I want to be a cowboy. Because I knew I was going to grow up and be a man. And there was a show on at this time when I was little called Wild Wild West. I don't know, some of you old people might know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I thought I was going to grow up to be either Jim or Artemis, and I was going to have, that guy was going to be my best friend. I thought I was going to have that life. I just knew I was going to have that kind of life. That's what I dreamed of. But I went through girl puberty, and it really shocked the heck out of me. As you can see, I went from, I'm skipping a lot of stuff because it's kind of painful, and I don't want to have to make you just suffer through the drudgery, but I start to look really unhappy in the pictures from puberty, and there really aren't many at all where, if I have a smile at this point, it's a very forced one. But I picked this picture because I'm there with my sister, my grandma's in the background, my dad's in the foreground. This is Christmas, and this was very typical of me, as it is for many trans guys, to wear a rather androgynous outfit. I would wear a long sleeve button-down shirt and wear a jumpsuit over that to just kind of cover up the breasts that were growing in. It was, as it is for many trans guys, it just triggered the crap out of me. And I know this is true for trans women too, to start to grow up and turn into what you thought you were never going to be and that you don't identify with. This is when the dysphoria really hits hard. I'm sorry to say, like a lot of transgender people, I tried to manage that dysphoria not only by seeking therapy, which was with people in Cleveland in the 1970s who did not know what was going on with me and couldn't help me, but I also started self-medicating with alcohol at this time. And literally, I did start drinking when I was 12, exact same time when I was developing into female puberty. I couldn't handle it. The other thing I share here is what happens from wanting to be a cowboy and a president to now I'm going through puberty, and the only thing I can say about what will happen to me when I grow up is I'll do anything as long as I don't hate it. That was the best I could imagine. At this point, I really was depressed and suicidal, and that didn't go away for a long time. I was fortunate to grow up in a time when we had what was called gender bending in popular culture. David Bowie, Grace Jones, even Mick Jagger back in those days, Elton John. There was a lot of playing with gender. This isn't supposed to be timed, but sometimes, whatever. Anyway, so there were times in my adolescence when I wasn't horribly triggered. I wore vests a lot like I am right now, again, to just kind of cover up the gender problems and the things I didn't identify with. I'm there with my grandmother there. This is with my youngest cousin. I was happy again whenever I could present in an androgynous way. So here I'm wearing the long hair this was a source of conflict when I felt, for whatever reason, I won't name it, but for whatever reason, when I felt I had to conform to being a female in a more conventional way, I was very unhappy. When I would go through these certain like spiritual crises or something and say, I'm just going to cut all my hair off. This was after I saw Gandhi in this particular case. And I claimed it was about that. I'm going to be a renunciate. That was part of it. That's part of the yoga part too. But I thought that was a solution. It's like I'll renounce gender and sexuality, then I don't have to deal with all this stuff. So I would cut my hair off and I'd start to get happy again. I'd start to be somewhat at peace. So this is me. I started at New York University and really, really short hair. I would just try to be fairly androgynous. I would still wear men's clothes a lot of the time. And I could make peace with myself if I did that and try to just basically live as a eunuch or a renunciate, as we call it in the yoga tradition. So I have my David Bowie t-shirt on. This is me on my way to seminary, moving to California from Ohio. Going back. Okay. So I was pretty happy here. Again, my life of a renunciate. Now I was going to be a pastor and work in nonprofit organizations and serve. I had been living in a homeless shelter after college, working there and doing a lot of nonprofit work. So again, I just thought I'll just serve other people, forget about myself, not deal with gender issues, not have any kind of sexual life, and then I'll get to bypass all this stuff. When I did that, I was fairly at peace. This is me in seminary with my dad. Extremely short hair, but still wearing a dress and jewelry. I was very conflicted, as you can see. This is graduating seminary with my mom. Same thing. Most of the time I would not wear makeup, but for my graduation, my mom coming out from Ohio, I put on a dress and makeup. But, you know, it was just a conflicted way of life. Again, part of my spiritual centeredness, I went on to study I wanted to study the Bible, basically, in the original languages to find out what it really said about gender and sexuality, because I could not believe the faith that I had adopted as an 18-year-old in order to serve those who are poor, to serve the hungry and those who are homeless, and all the things I really cared about. A peace witness. You know, I was really drawn into Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount. So I became a Christian at 18. And I was shocked by homophobia. One of the things I have to tell you is about the time I became Christian in 1984, AIDS had hit. The AIDS epidemic started at about 1981 in New York. And so by the time the mid-'80s hit, something new had happened. We went from the gender-bending, celebrating culture where gender fluidity and bisexuality seems to be affirmed and okay, and nobody really asked about it in the church that I experienced, to by the mid-'80s now, the religion I had just joined became rabidly homophobic. And I didn't understand. I had been raised by feminists. I didn't understand. So I devoted my life. I came out to a seminary, as I said, to study the Bible in the original languages, find out what the heck does this book say, why are these Christians saying these things about people like me, feeling very unsafe, and started going into the closet. At this point, I was almost in my late 20s. I was in my mid-20s, essentially. I was really itching to start a family. I was Christian. I had training now, basically, that qualified me to be a minister in the Christian tradition, maybe teach theology or Bible or something like that. And I'm looking at, wow, I'm entrenched in this homophobic culture. What am I going to do? And I want to marry a man. I've always been attracted to men. Like I said, I dreamed of basically Brokeback life, except without getting killed at the end. So, I was like, okay, I want to find my guy. I want to start my family, but I'm in a homophobic world. I can't do that as a guy. So I started to throw, even though here I am in men's clothes again, but anyway, I started to throw myself into being the kind of Christian woman that would attract a mate. And so that's my engagement photo for my first marriage. And I think I'm smoldering pretty hard there as a Christian woman. I tried. But this is the night before the wedding, and I'm back to wearing a men's t-shirt and jeans and pulling my hair back so I don't have to look at it. Didn't pluck my eyebrows, didn't wear makeup, or head earrings there, but I think you can kind of see the guy peeking out of some of these. I did get to start my family that I so longed for. I know now today that as a gay person or a lesbian person, you can have children. I don't know why I didn't think about that then, but I didn't. So I really thought I had to go stealth and live as a woman to get this family. So this is me about to have my first daughter. And I was happy about having my first daughter. I will say this, today I feel very blessed that as a man, I got to have the experience of carrying, bearing, and nursing children. And I understand that very few men get to experience that. I don't regret that. I celebrate that. And you can see that I'm not faking it. I was happy about it. All right, so, but going through life to live that way was very hard. So I picked these pictures here because I'm like, to me, this person looks like a drag queen. And I love drag queens, but I think this is me. I didn't enjoy that. I mean, bless those who do. I have friends who are drag queens and I love them, but I'm not that guy. And this was very hard for me. I was working in that university, teaching Christian theology and ministry. Excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I was looking for help and being told try to take female hormones and psych meds. I was on psych meds in all these pictures. And I was pretty miserable. I mean, I think you can kind of see the strain in my face there. Now, I had a period where my first marriage ended and I got to live the life of a renunciate again. I'm wearing a shirt there, you can't really tell, but it has the yin and yang symbol on it. And I'm out on a bike ride in the Azusa Canyon with my daughter, Anna. I was pretty happy when I was a single parent and again got to bypass issues of gender and sexuality by just living as a unit. But I got lonely, I wanted another child, and this is her, my little sweet pie. She's 6 years old now. But I went back, I was still at that university, I was still expected to live as a Christian woman. There was no way I was coming out as a gay trans man there. And to do that, I kept taking those psych meds. I kept drinking. I drank more and more and more and more. And my body started to shut down. I got down to 112 pounds. You actually don't see those pictures here. This is not my lowest point because at a certain point I stopped allowing myself to be photographed because it was upsetting my family back home in Ohio. But this is during that year. Excuse me, let me go back. So this is me trying, these are the pictures I tried to show at the university where I worked before when I was trying to get them to understand why I had to come out. I was still working full time at this time as a theology professor. And I know they knew I was dying. I came to work every day, but I was hospitalized for pancreas failure. My kidneys shut down at the end of this year, even after I stopped drinking, from the chronic malnutrition and dehydration that were my reaction to trying to live as a woman. But the doctors could not find any physical cause. It was simply due to stress, chronic stress. It was too much. I just couldn't keep doing this. Thank God, sorry, I have to show you this, but I do. I feel like I do. Okay, before I do, I'll just tell you, that diagnostic manual change I told you about, I finally got to get a new doctor. As I was dying, thinking, this is it, I need to make my last, I literally made a will during this time. But I was thinking there was nothing left to do. But I tried it a last-ditch effort. I tried a new doctor, a new healthcare system, and I was told within weeks, you do not need to be on any of these psych meds. I had stopped drinking at least. But they said, you don't need to be on any of these psych meds. You don't need anything except to just live as a transgender man. Why are you trying to force yourself to be a woman when you're not a woman? I got off all the psych meds. I've never needed to go back on them since. I started getting very, very happy. As you can see, this is me a year, actually really just a few months after that last picture with my grandmother, starting to come out as myself. At this point, I knew I was transgender, but I was trying to be very quiet about how I shared that, very slow about how I shared that, not wanting to trigger the other people in my life. And very uncertain about how I was going to proceed in the work environment I was. Luckily, I was on sabbatical, so I didn't have to face it head on. But I started to get well. You can certainly see that I was getting well. Unfortunately, although, and this is a letter, an excerpt from a letter from my psychiatrist saying, you know what, he is a trans man, and he is not mentally ill, and he is qualified to make decisions about his medical care and his legal gender and his name and all those things. So that was very affirming to me as well. Very soon she was able to establish that I wasn't mentally ill at all. I shared this letter with my employer immediately when my students started to figure out I was trans, and the rumor mill started. But anyway, so what you see there is the result of, and on the next slide, I will not dwell here because I don't want to trigger people, but I did get pushback from people. I'm just going to skip past that stuff, but you'll know it was there. I just wanted to show you how bad it gets. What happened was, even as I started to come out, my spouse told me, if you let anyone know about this, I see that you are a man and I see you are getting better, but if you do anything to live as a man, including getting your hair cut, I will kill myself, or I will divorce you. And I got pushback from a lot of people in my life, thinking I was still crazy, that even though I wasn't using anymore, and even though my psychiatrist and psychologist saw it differently, they just couldn't accept it. Including the people that were helping me at that time to stay sober. My mentor in addiction recovery kept saying, go to women's support meetings, put on a dress, put on lipstick, wear a wig if you have to, but you are going to live as a woman. And if you don't want to live as a woman, you're going to take a year living as a woman before you make that decision. That's when I relapsed. That's when I call it relapse, but essentially that's when I went a little bit nutty and I had always had a problem, as many transgender people do, especially, well, I won't say transgender people sometimes have body dysphoria, and some of us use self-injury, especially on the parts we don't identify with, to cope with that, unless we're allowed to just live as ourselves. So going back into the closet, as I was directed to do to stay sober, I don't know how I did that off of there. Any thoughts? Anyway, so that was so triggering for me that I didn't want to live. I thought if I have to go back to living as that woman that was so miserable in the previous year that was dying, I can't live like that. And I had a bit of a meltdown. Now, that, thank God, it only lasted a day. But I did take pictures of it because even going through it, I thought, you know what, I need people who are telling me this message to see what it does. And I need people to see what transphobia does to me, but probably not just to me. And indeed, I've come to find out, since I've gotten to know many other transgender people, that this is what transphobia does to people, not just to me. Okay, so since then, now you see me. There I am. I look like me now. Skip forward a bit. So I found that if I didn't want to be in that crazy place of self-injury and drinking and self-annihilation, that I was going to have to be honest all the time about who I really am. And that led to some rupture of my life. Indeed, that person that threatened to divorce me did divorce me. We lost our home. I lost my job. At one point, I felt like, wow, I've lost everything just because I was being honest and trying to stay sober. And I was a bit... I've had my moments. They're not dysphoric moments, at least, but moments of, what? You know? So, but mostly I'm happy. I wanted just to see little snapshots from my coming out, and this is mostly since the rupture of my life, when a lot of the stability went away, or a lot of the things that had been in my life before went away. I'm happy. I mean, I've gone through a divorce and a job loss and a career loss, and kind of feeling humiliated in the public media, having very private things made very public. I've gone through pretty darn happy, because I get to be me. And that little kid that had to go in the closet such a long time ago got to come out and grow up. And I'm really grateful for that, no matter what else has happened. I've made a lot of great friends. I've reestablished a connection with Fran. But I get to be friends with people as myself now. Not living a lie, not in two closets, a transgender closet and a gay closet. But basically, using spirituality, and this is the part we were really supposed to be talking about tonight, using spirituality, coming to that point of, you know what, my scriptures, the Christian scriptures say, perfect love casts out fear. And I think that's what's really changed in my life. It's not really my gender that's changed, because what I would like you to see after looking at all these pictures of my life is that I was always a guy. I was a guy who tried to live as a woman for a while, but I was always a guy. What changed is I stopped living in fear. And now I get to live a life of real love with students who I don't get to work on campus with anymore, but they're still in my life. They come over, we hang out, we're in constant contact, we're family to each other. A lot of them have been cast out of their families for being LGBT Christian families, so they're my family. I say, good, I get all the grandchildren. Rock on, I love them. Okay, so I'm at that age, that's what I think about it. Okay, so anyway, I'm pretty much a happy guy. I get to come do things like this all the time now. Whatever I'm doing as myself. And I'm really blessed. So just that, yeah, before and after. This came out of a conversation I had recently. If you have any doubts about whether someone should be allowed to transition, and again, this is kind of directed more at the religious bigots, I think this speaks volumes. This is where I was at living as a woman. This was the end of the line for me. This was the end of my rope. I tried as hard as I could to be a Christian woman. I swear to you. I studied feminism. I threw myself into gender studies. And I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot of really valuable things about the things that unite us all as human beings, and how destructive gender binaries and patriarchy can be for all of us. So I'm glad that I got to do that. But I couldn't be a woman. There was no feminist philosophy that could turn me into a woman. There was no spirituality, disciplines, no yoga, no prayer, no fasting, no anything, no scripture study. I mean, I studied all the world scriptures. There was nothing that could turn me into a woman, because I'm just not a woman. And I love women. This is another thing I get a lot is, oh, you're a misogynist. You couldn't come to terms with your womanhood because you hate women. Well, I can see why that somebody might think that if I were a woman, or maybe the fact that I'm a lover of men, I happen to be gay. But I love women friends. I love my women friends. Of course I do. I love my daughters. No, it's not that. And I really tried hard to be a woman. I would have loved to be a woman. I just don't happen to be one. So I happen to be a guy. I happen to be a gay guy. And, you know, now I'm cool with it. That's okay. That's good, as a matter of fact. But anyway, so that's it. That's my story in pictures. And I just thought the pictures might help us see that these aren't abstract issues. They're not, I get really tired of dealing, and I do deal with it every day, people telling me that it's an issue of sin, it's a moral issue, it's a theological issue, it's a spiritual issue, it's a psychological issue. No, it isn't. It's just a gender. And so that's one person's story. We're all very, very diverse. There's many different expressions of gender, not just mine, not just the binary ones, but I hope that helps start a conversation. We can't get too close to each other.
I'm not going to use this. I'm going to sort of be right here.
Okay.
Because I want to see the people. Oh, that's a nice view.
Isn't that nice?
Yes.
That was my view all night long.
It's very nice. What a great group. We have a few questions just to get the question and answer dialogue part going with this. Questions that have been collected from University of Redlands student groups. Okay? We'll start here, and then we'll open it up to your questions. We wanted to do it this way to get the questions initially done through an anonymous process, because not everybody, they may have a vital question that they don't want to come up and ask. What's the best way to support someone going through this transition?
Okay, I know you have really good resources for that on campus, like Ren, and because you just talked about this recently, right? And Robin Cooper and the LGBTQ support and gender questioning group. Robin?
Yes.
Okay. So you have really good resources for that on campus. I will point you to this. There is a website called forge-forward.org. Forgeforward.org. It's on the resource list that's in the back of the room. Best place ever for very informed, credible, authoritative transgender 101 resources. And I would just point you to existing resources rather than try to duplicate that. Main thing is, I know the question was phrased, what do you do? But there's some major faux pas to just avoid, namely, try to let someone define their own gender. I mean, I just think that's the biggest thing in the world. There are people who think that letting a transgender kid identify and live as their true gender is child abuse. I get this brought to me quite frequently, that particularly people in the religious community, or various religious communities. So what I always say is, you know what, I think I have children who will grow up to be adults. I don't think I need to police their gender. And I think that's a real thing we can do for each other, is just try not to define each other's gender. Listen, as somebody was talking, oh, she's not here, it's Denise. Your admin assistant. So there's a program on campus right now in peer counseling, I understand, about active listening. That's the biggest thing. Just listen. Don't judge. Just listen.
Thank you. How do you deal with people that are resistant to the things you're going through, especially people who are in a church community?
That's a really good question. I think that gets into what you asked me to talk about tonight. So I feel like before I was a Christian, I was involved with yoga. This has been a very pressing life question for me. I would like to explain why I got into yoga. As an androgynous child, I was targeted for a lot of bullying. And in fact, again, this could be a trigger for someone, so I'll try to be very general in what I say, but I was sexually assaulted by neighborhood boys repeatedly over a period of 6 years. To get away from that, I once ran into the street in front of a school bus. Now, there was brain damage done at that time, and I don't know if I was trying to end my life. I don't remember. Or if I was just so scared that I didn't care and I didn't look. I don't know. I can't tell you for sure. It wouldn't surprise me either way, because at that point already, with what was going on in my life, I had suicidal impulses. The point is, I came out of that accident not able to walk very well. And in fact, I walked for a limp with a limp for years. I was not able to jump. I wasn't able to climb the rope in gym class. I wasn't able to. There were a lot of things I wasn't able to do. And my family was very poor at that time. We could not afford any kind of physical rehabilitation. So what I had was books on yoga from the library with photographs. I would use those to try to learn. We also were very active with the YMCA and YWCA, especially the YWCA. So I took some community classes with my parents at the time, introducing yoga, and that really took off also with meditation. So my answer to this question has to do with the fact that from a very young age, being raised by pacifists, being introduced to yoga, and then later becoming a Christian pacifist, what has always been very important to me in dealing with people who are violent toward me, and that is something I've had to deal with my whole life, is to remain a witness for peace. So in this particular period of time when I've received a lot of, again, death threats, loss of important relationships, including professional relationships, I've tried to use this as a way to talk about building unity, using prayer, using, the Huffington Post blog that you introduced me with. I'm on either the main page or Religion or Gay Voices, but often the main page every single week almost, promoting unity. among people who don't really want unity with me. But I'm going to do that with the students I mentor. I mean, they're amazing. I want to say that the 15 years in the classroom teaching them about Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Gustavo Gutierrez, and all these wonderful activists who use nonviolent direct action to bring about peace and unity. They put that in play, and when what happened to me, they started a change.org petition that got 2,500 signatures before it was stopped, and mostly my former students. And these were mostly Christian students who didn't understand my gender identity, but they didn't care that they didn't understand. They just said, nobody deserves to be treated this way. Because you don't have to understand. 99% of people are not going to understand what it is to be transgender. That's okay. We don't have to understand each other to love each other. All right, so, yeah.
The students wanted to know how you came out to your kids and what that was like.
Yeah, that's a story. No, it's not really a story. So you saw how sick I was. This is the main reason I wanted tonight to bring the pictures. You saw how sick I was. Imagine that that was your parent that you saw in those photos from Easter and Christmas 2012. Your parent, you saw skeletal. Christmas Day, you saw the picture of me Christmas Day. That was their Christmas. I have kids. Their Christmas, their parent is drunk, suicidal, emaciated, wanting to be dead. Horrible. And when I was finally given permission by my treatment team to say, no, you don't have to live as a mentally ill woman anymore. How about living as a sane trans man? This was a huge relief for my family. You could see in the pictures, again, the change was immediate. Even before I cut my hair and stopped dyeing and stopped wearing makeup, I was at peace. And I was happy, and I started putting on weight, and they knew I wasn't going to die. I mean, that's a huge thing for little kids. My children are minors. To go from, I think my parent is dying, to, I know my parent isn't going to die. And my parent's healthy, not in bed all the time, wasting away, but playing with me, helping me with my homework, taking me places. We have Disneyland passes again. I mean, okay, those are the things. They're happy. They're like, I don't care if you're a guy or a girl. You're with me. You're here. You're alive. You're playing with me. You're taking me to Disneyland.
What about addiction, drugs and alcohol? We have, most students I know that confide in me have even a daily use of drugs and alcohol. So what advice would you give to someone who's dealing with addiction issues or just questioning about that?
There are so many great resources for that. So for myself, being a very spiritual person, I find it helpful to have a spiritual solution to that. And there are some, without naming names, there are some very well-known spiritually centered recovery programs where you have a mentor and you have a community and you go to meetings and you have literature. There's all kinds of support. That's what helps me, having community. And I think getting sober and being part of that community helped remind me how important it is not to isolate. Because honestly, I would say this for addicts and for people who are transgender, this just happens to be equally true or likewise true. Being isolated, feeling totally alone, is I think really what took me down the path that when I got to the lowest points, and the things that you saw that I was doing that were self-destructive in the slides. Those were times when I felt utterly alone, when I felt like I'm the only one, nobody gets it, nobody wants me around. Those are times that I've learned are dangerous times for me to use or self-injure. One of the other things I would say about addiction is, at least in my experience of addiction and many other people that I know of in recovery, would say sometimes we're scared to feel our feelings. One of the things I learned from my students who were about your age, after I got sober, hanging out with the gay and lesbian and transgender and queer identifying students, they would say to me, and maybe you've heard this expression because you're their age, but they'd say, oh, I'm feeling the feels. And I was like, what's that? I'd never heard that expression. I was like, that's what it is. That helped me more in recovery than anything else when my kids started saying, I'm feeling the feels. And I was like, oh, that's what that is. I don't have to drink over that. I'm just feeling the feels. So now I go to these meetings and I tell people my age, I feel like I have to take a drink, my mother's dying. I'm like, no, you're feeling the feels. It's okay. You can't tell me that. It goes away. Just get through it.
Adam, what advice would you give to students who are struggling on this campus with getting their name changed, with the registrar, the documents, using a restroom when there's no unisex option, that kind of thing? What advice would you give to these students?
That's really hard stuff. Forge Forward also has good resources on that. Like I said, that's a really good source for everything trans. It's actually aimed at caregiving professionals, people who treat transgender clients, so it's top-notch, credible, up-to-the-minute information about laws, legal protections, things like that. For myself personally, I will say this, the Transgender Law Center has helped me tremendously. They have online resources, free, pro bono, things like that, to help you with name changes, gender marker changes. And honestly, I had help. That paperwork was pretty much done for me. I mean, I just had to fill out a questionnaire. The LA Gay and Lesbian Center has a law team that does that for free as well. There are some really cool resources that those of us who are able to donate and help fund these nonprofit organizations, they exist to help young people or anybody who's financially struggling have access to those legal services. The bathroom issue, though, is a separate issue. I mean, that's just a daily practical issue, and I'm glad someone brought it up, because I feel like when I go out and speak like this is the #1 issue that people who are not trans might get triggered about. And like, why is this even an issue for you? It's just a bathroom. That's exactly it. It's just a bathroom. So, that's exactly it. It's something that all of us have to do. Boy, if there's anything in the world that affirms my choice of name, Ha-Adam, as just being a human being, it's that we all have to go to the bathroom. That's really not a gender issue. Everybody has to do that. So if you are a person that was identified a certain way on your birth certificate, but now, I'm going to go with trans women here, and a young trans woman I know who's a high school student in Azusa who's been in the news a lot. I won't say her name, but she has been. She's a very cool person. But anyway, so she looks like a female, right? She is a female. She's a trans female. She dresses like a female. She wears makeup. Her hair is feminine. She has a rather androgynous but more feminine name. She is a female. But there are schools where she would be told, you have to go use the men's room. Now, what happens when a woman uses the men's room? This is not a safe thing for women to do in many cases. I hear from my trans sisters all the time that they get assaulted or threatened with assault when they're forced to use a men's room. Trans men, like myself, I can only speak for myself here, but I have talked to my trans brothers about this a lot. I'll tell you a story about Disneyland. I mentioned Disneyland earlier. Okay, I was at Disneyland with my daughters. I use the men's room now because I look like a guy. If I try to use the ladies' room, what happens is I'll be coming in, a woman will be coming out, and she'll go, no, okay, what are you doing here? You know, it's not comfortable for anybody in this situation. But I saw a little boy being dragged by his mother into the women's room, and he literally was throwing himself on the ground, kicking and screaming and crying, a little boy. And I thought as I was watching this boy, I get this, because trans men and trans women sort of feel like that on the inside. It's humiliating being forced to use a restroom that you know isn't yours. And I can't really explain it more than that, but I think children are very honest in their body language and in their expression about just how that feels. It's rather shaming, it's rather degrading. But also for trans women, it's not even safe. It's an invitation to rape. So, answering the practical question, it's a very hard thing to navigate, and it's something that we as trans people have to navigate on a case-by-case basis. I don't know anybody that has a better answer than that in the trans community, people that have been transitioned a long time. It's an issue we always face in public. I've had clinicians tell me this that have done trainings for transgender cultural competence work for mental health clinicians in several different clinics now. They have clients, and I thought this was just me too, but it's not. We hold it in public so that we don't have to make that choice. And we hold it until our kidneys shut down, until we get bladder infections, until we make ourselves ill. Because we don't want to deal with the bullying. And we don't want to embarrass cisgendered people who don't like it when we use their bathroom. That's really not okay. But that's how some of us navigate it. We just try not to use, and even to this day, I still will try to plan my outings around opportunities to use a bathroom that safe. Other than that, you have to navigate. The way we usually, most of us, and I myself, navigate that is, what am I going to do that's going to be the least triggering to other people in this situation that I can stand doing without becoming suicidally dysphoric? I'm very fortunate now that I've been on hormones a little while. I pass as a man. I'm usually, it's not difficult for me to use the men's room now, but there was a time when it was very difficult. And I would use a woman's room, but I would feel very ashamed. Anyway, that's all I can really say. You have to feel it out.
Yeah. Now we got just a few questions from a class that deals with religion and gay, lesbian, trans issues. What do you think God's opinion is of trans people?
I believe God created transgender people with joy and love and creativity and grace. Great name. And yeah, that's been the biggest change in my life. I said not living in fear was the biggest change in my life. That I was able to not live in fear because I had two different spiritual mentors in recovery addiction, actually, tell me, what if you stopped? I had said to my students all those years, I identify with Jacob wrestling with God to get a new name and a blessing. Because that's how I felt. I was always fighting God, like, why the hell did you make me this way? What is wrong with you? Why don't you fix me? And then I would identify with Paul, who in the Christian Bible that says, I have this thorn in the flesh, I keep praying for it to go away, and it doesn't go away. And I learned to live with it. That's what I thought it was, being gender non-conforming, I'll just call it, because I didn't really exactly know what it was. To be told, why don't you pray with gratitude for the way that God made you, which seems to be as a transgender man. I had never thought of that. The first time someone gave me that suggestion in prayer was January 2013, right around the same time that my therapist said, why don't you just live as a transgender man, and you're going to be depressed and anxious and suicidal. So that's how I started to pray. And I've lived into that prayer. At the time it was an experiment. I'll just try that. That's what they said, just try it. And you've tried the fighting God and trying to get God to fix you for 40 years. It hasn't worked. That's the definition of insanity. You keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, trying to get a different result. Why don't you try something you've never tried before? So, and I found it to be true. I've seen myself flourish. I've seen my relationships flourish. I've been able to do more for other people as a pastor, as a teacher than I ever did as a parent. I'm bearing better spiritual fruit. Yeah.
So, yeah, well, you are really unique as a transgender person and a Christian minister.
There's a lot more, though. There's a lot of trans women who are Cameron Partridge over at Harvard is a trans man who's ordained as an Anglican. But there are others. I'm not totally unique. I am more evangelical. As an evangelical, I'm sorry.
So are you preaching in a church? Have you been accepted by your denomination?
My denomination hasn't made a decision about me yet. I'm sort of flying under their radar, which is very strange. But nothing's been done about me, so I'm still ordained with them at this point. There are different places like the Episcopal Church and Metropolitan Community Church. There's places I could go if that becomes a problem. In terms of preaching, I do, as I do with the teaching, I go where I'm called. And so I'm not in any one particular place, but I get to go a lot of different places in communities where they're trying to learn about transgender identity and experience. And so I actually get to serve more people this way. At this point.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up. And if no one has any questions out there, then we can go back to these questions. What do you think is the most important thing for people to know about your story? What do you want to leave them with?
Okay, well, like I said, I actually, strangely enough, even though I'm up here and showed you all these baby pictures of me, I don't like talking about myself. So that's actually a really good question. I don't think I'm the point of my story. I think the point of my story is that there are a lot. You are not alone, I guess is the point of my story. The reason I tell my story is that I've come to find out, since what happened to me so publicly, that was so humiliating to me as far as being disconnected from my professional community. Because of that, people from around the world started contacting me who were closeted, particularly Christians, and said, wow, I didn't know I could be out and be Christian. I didn't know I could stay in my faith as a transgender person. I love Jesus and I've been fighting myself all this time. Or, conversely, I would hear the story, I learned to accept myself as transgender and now I'm not suicidal, but I felt there was no place for me with God. I thought I couldn't pray anymore, I thought I could never go to church again. So people from all over the world contact me and they want to hang on to who they are spiritually and as themselves, their own gender, as they understand it. So that's the reason for telling my story, so that more people hear that. I felt utterly alone. I was so confused as a gay trans man. I didn't know any other trans men. I didn't know you could be a gay trans man. The thing about loving men really threw me. I thought, if I love men, I must be a woman. Why did I think that? I was an ally in the gay community. What? I'll never know. I'll never know. But I guess, I don't know, whatever. Anyhow, yeah, no, you're not alone. Whatever your gender expression is, whatever your sexual identity is, you're a human being, and we're not alone.